Python, yes, perfect. There are lots of different examples out there. There are quite literally over 100 different languages that run on Java, the platform. Yeah? Even Sun Microsystems officially supports this. At one point, they officially supported no less than 5 different languages that ran on the JVM. Java was certainly one of them. When Java 6 came out, they officially supported JavaScript. They hired on the JRuby developers, which was an opportunity to take Ruby code and run it on the JVM. There are a lot of companies that do that very successfully. ThoughtWorks is a company that writes their applications in Ruby on Rails, Mingle, and applications like that. They're Ruby on Rails apps, but they run them inside of Tomcat, thanks to JRuby. So Sun supports, the JRuby developers are no longer with Sun, but for a while, for several years, Sun did support them. You mentioned Jython. The primary developers on Jython are Sun employees. And the 5th one is not Scala, interestingly. JavaFX. JavaFX is an RIA framework, much like Flex, much like Silverlight, but indeed it actually runs on the JVM. It's a different language as well. So when I'm here talking about Groovy, and I am going to talk about Groovy, I'm just trying to set the stage. Groovy is not a language that is supported by Sun. Sun doesn't have the Groovy developers on staff. It's completely open source. But what I'm doing here is not selling you a language that Sun is unaware of or that would take you away from this. One more bit of a story, and then we'll actually see some source code here. The name Groovy is kind of interesting. You don't have to wear your hair like mine in order to program in this language. But James Strachan was the founder of the language. And he was sitting down one day, but a train was running late, and so he was looking at Python. And he found some really interesting language features in Python. He loved the triple quotes in Python that allows you to do multi-line strings. And he says, you know, that's really interesting. That's not an interesting enough feature to make me want to become a Python developer. But wouldn't it be neat if I could have those same triple quotes in Java that I do in Python? And then he was looking over at JavaScript, and he says, oh, I really like the way JavaScript does this. Wouldn't it be cool if I could take these JavaScript language features and bring them back to the JVM? And wouldn't it be groovy if we could take these different language features from different languages and pull them back? So Groovy is fairly unique in the languages space in that it could not exist without Java. As a matter of fact, if we want to get really geeky for a moment, can we get geeky for a moment? Yes. Yes. That Groovy uses Antler as its lexer and parser. And it actually starts with the Java AST, the Java abstract syntax tree. So what that means is that Groovy is a perfect superset of Java. You can do anything that you would normally do in Java in Groovy as well. But what it does is it brings these interesting other language features over as well. So as I'm going through some of these examples, you'll say, aha, that looks like Ruby. Yes, it does. Oh, that looks like JavaScript. Oh, indeed. Yes. The whole point is to take these cool language features from other languages and bring them back to the JVM rather than forcing you to go to another language to pick up on them. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. Enough talking and hand waving. Let's come in here and look at some source code. Now, the reason I call this the amazing Groovy weight loss plan, you can see I do not follow the Groovy weight loss plan myself. But the reason I call it this is because we're going to take a look at idiomatic Java examples that are this big. And in almost every case, the Groovy equivalent is going to be down here. Now, I'm going to start very slowly at the beginning and demonstrate to you the Java example and the Groovy example. We'll go in and look at the bytecode and all these things. But after one or two, you'll believe me, won't you? That what I'm demonstrating to you is bytecode equivalent to what you're doing in Java. But what we're doing is dramatically reducing the syntax. So you can get more done with fewer lines of code. Why is fewer lines of code so interesting? Are any of you in here paid by the lines of code you produce in a given year? No, that's what COBOL developers were paid on, not Java developers. So I'm not interested in having you spend more time to do the same things. I'm actually having you potentially more readable as well. So when I'm looking at this amazing weight loss plan of Groovy's, it's not just a simple reduction in lines of code. It's an increased clarity, an increased brevity. There are some programming languages that are very concise. Perl is very concise, isn't it? Yes, it's what I call a write once language. You write Perl once and you have no idea what it does after the fact. Yes. So Groovy is not a concise language, I think, and this will be up for you to judge. I think what it does is it reduces the lines of code and adds clarity, not takes away from the clarity. Because we aren't interested in languages that increase the size of our application. What we're looking for are applications that reduce the size of the applications. I will let you decide in this visual metaphor here which language is Groovy and which language is Java, represented by the pants. Okay? So to begin with, and don't roll your eyes, I promise you this is relevant, that we're going to start with a hello world example. Do you remember who wrote the very first hello world example? What language was it written in? C, absolutely. Kernahan and Ritchie, the K&R book. And their goal was to give you the simplest possible program in C that would possibly run. It did nothing more than spit out hello world to the console, but it demonstrated that you were able to compile and run your code and all these things. This is the simplest possible program you can write in Java. How simple is that? Now remember, what we're trying to do is print out to the console, right? So the first thing we'll do, and I will actually live code this for you so you can see what I'm talking about here. I will come in here right now and I will start a new file. We'll call it Hello Java. By the way, you can see I'm actually using a text editor here, not an IDE. I used to do all my Java development in TextPad. When's the last time you've ever tried to write any Java outside of an IDE? Try it. Let me know how that works out for you. So I'm going to come in here right now. Remember, I want to print out something to the console. So the first thing I have to do is say, well, wait a second. What does this have to do with printing out to the console? Well, you see, Java is an object-oriented programming language. Everything needs to be in an object. So here's our class, Hello Java. Okay, I understand that. What's public? Well, you see there's public and there's private and there's protected. Okay, all right, I understand that. Have we printed anything out yet? No. All right, so here we go. I'm about ready to start printing out. You let me know when I start printing out, okay? Public static void main. Have I printed anything out yet at all? No. And when I'm teaching beginning classes, my students inevitably ask me, what does all that mean? So just trust me, type it. It works. All right? This is the magical incantation that you need to chant in order to get Java to print something out. Okay, wonderful. We're about ready to print something out. Can I just say, println hello world? No, everything is object-oriented. So I need to have the system object that has a public static out method, and I'm calling a method called hello world. Oops, excuse me. Here we go. Oh, I'll get there. All right, there we go. Finally. Whew. It took me a lot of work to do this. Now, I'm doing this for a very specific reason. That, in fact, that is all I'm really interested in, isn't it? The rest of this is empty ceremony that I have to do to satisfy the great Java gods. Without this, they're very angry at me. The compiler yells at me. Every time you get a compiler error, you know what that is? That's Java saying you're doing it wrong. It's crushing your spirit, crushing your will, saying, no, you need to do things Java's way, not the way you think you should do it. All right, so am I ready to run it now? Can I go ahead and just say Java, hello Java? No, why not? Oh, I have to compile it as well? When am I going to be able to print something out? Okay, finally. I will Javak my code, yes? Javak my code, and then I will Java my code, and finally I get hello world. And that's all the time we have. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed yourself this afternoon. Yeah? That was a lot of work to do the simplest possible example in Java. How about I do the same thing in Groovy? I'll even name the file hi instead of hello. This is a more casual language, right? So we can do that. Guess what? This is executable Groovy code right here. I can come right out to the command prompt. I can type in Groovy hi, and there it is. Magic, isn't it? Now let's consider what I'm talking about. I started this talk by saying that Groovy is Java. So one of the things we said is, well, wait a second, does this mean that because I didn't compile it, because I don't see any class files laying around, that in fact Groovy is an interpreted language? No, not at all. In fact, Groovy, the command line that I typed in, actually compiled that into bytecode and handed it off to the JVM dynamically at runtime in memory. There were no class files and artifacts. So there are some really nice things you can do with simple Groovy scripts that would replace a batch file or a shell script or anything like that. How many times have you said, oh, I remember how to iterate through an array in Java, I forget how to do that in a shell script? Yeah? Well, imagine being able to do that in Java-like syntax. But to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here, I'm going to go in, remember how I java'd my source code? I'm going to use the corresponding groovic command here to do the same thing, groovy C. We will see that there's now a hello java.class and a corresponding hi.class. Have you used the java p command before? Help me out, what does java p do? Prints out all the bytecode. I like saying it's a bytecode disassembler, but I like saying it allows me to peruse my bytecode. So we're going to peruse my bytecode right now. We're going to go in and take a look at what hello Java looks like. And we can see that it was compiled from hello java.java. By the way, Java P is a part of the JDK. So you have this as your standard Java tools. What version of Java am I using? There you go, Java 1.6. Yeah? So as I come in here and Java P, my hello Java, we can see that it was compiled from hello java.java. We see public class hello Java extends JavaLang object. Interesting. Did I have to write extends JavaLang object? No. The compiler did that for me, since in Java everything extends JavaLang object unless you specify otherwise. The compiler provided that for me. Oh, look, it provided a default no-arg constructor as well. We know that these are the rules of Java, that every class must have a public no-argument constructor, and so the compiler provided that for me. So let me use the same Java P command that I did before and take a look at hi.class. Now, this isn't a stack trace, I promise you. This is the same thing. There's just a lot more going on in here. Yeah? But notice this. Public class hi. Now, I named the file hi, and so since I didn't start with public class hi in the script, it actually derived that. You'll see I don't do that. And as a matter of fact, I only use that for scripts. Other times I'll say public class foo, and it will be determined. But you can see from the file name, hi.groovy, it wrapped it in a public class form. Now, this doesn't extend JavaLang object, it extends JavaLang script. Again, this is the one exception when you're writing Groovy scripts. They don't extend JavaLang object. When I start showing you pogos in just a minute, you know pojos, don't you? Plain old Java objects, pogos, plain old Groovy objects will extend JavaLang object as well. So this is the exception right in here. But you can see amidst everything else, the Groovy C compiler provided me the public no-arg constructor, and in fact, it gave me a public static void main string array args in there as well. And so this is functionally equivalent without all that added ceremony. What Groovy did was it gave me all of that baggage for free behind the scenes and still allowed me to write this code. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now that's just a simple script. Let's come in and take a look at something a little more realistic here. POJOs, plain old Java objects. We see that this is a public class that has private attributes and public getters and setters. This is about as idiomatic as Java comes, doesn't it? We write POJOs over and over and over and over and over again. How many of your classes do you write that aren't public? How many of your attributes do you ever write that aren't private? Yeah. And so if we look at the Groovy equivalent, and I'm going to do that same thing I did before, and this time we'll see that these two are absolutely bytecode equivalent. But this Groovy POGO right here is dramatically fewer lines to write. Now, there are a couple of things we will notice out of this. I'm going to come in here right now and do exactly what we saw. I'm going to come in and I'm going to call it person.groovy, and I'm going to say class person. This isn't a script anymore. This is an actual class, and I'm going to compile and run. Notice that I left off the public. Public in Groovy is the default. By default, all classes are public, all attributes are private, all methods are public. I'll say that again. All classes are public. All attributes are private. All methods are public by default. You can very easily override that. As a matter of fact, there's nothing stopping me from doing this kind of thing. This is from the Department of Redundancy department, though. Yeah? There's no need for that. In the spirit of brevity, what I want to do is I want to come in here and say string first name, string last name, and quite literally be done. Groovic person, Java P person. I will see public class person extends Java lang object. It implements Groovy lang. I'm off the side of the screen. Groovy lang. Where did it go? There it is. Implements Groovy lang Groovy object. This is an interface. Since in Java we can only have a single parent inheritance, what the compiler does is it provides an interface and an implementation for that interface as well. So that's where all these additional classes are going on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the metaprogramming aspects of Groovy, but all this additional functionality is to handle the dynamic nature of Groovy, to handle metaprogramming, to truly handle adding additional fields and additional methods dynamically at runtime. That's a very good question. The question was, do we have a Groovy P? No, because Java P does exactly the same kind of thing. If Java C, I'm saying that the compiler, if Java C were a pluggable compiler, there would be no need for Groovy C. In fact, we would just say, hey, Java C, when you see .groovy files, go ahead and compile it with the Groovy compiler. Java, do those kinds of things. But in fact, the Groovy C compiler is a meta compiler. And so you can configure it to only compile Groovy files, and then Groovy C will defer compiling Java to the Java files as well, the Java compiler. So yeah, so when there are perfectly valid Java alternatives, Groovy won't recreate the wheel. It won't reinvent the wheel. So you'll see the examples I'm using throughout the rest of this code. I'm using Java IO files. Why? Because they're perfectly good. What Groovy does is adds new methods to a Java IO file, but it's fundamentally a Java IO file. Fundamentally a Java util array list. Fundamentally a Java net URL, those kinds of classes. Public class person extends Java lang object. We will see I get my default no-arg constructor that I would expect to see. And in fact, I get getters and setters. So this behavior gives you an idiomatic Java file. This is distilled down to its simplest possible thing. I couldn't take anything else out of this, right? But notice I've left off the semicolons. I've left off the public and the private. I've certainly left off the getters and setters. If your IDE can generate them, certainly the compiler can generate them as well. And this is what I'm left with. At any given time, all right, you're a smart crowd. If I do something like that, what would you expect to see behind the scenes? Only a getter, no setter. Absolutely. Let's prove it. You're absolutely right. This will be anticlimactic. But we'll come back in here, Java P that person. Yes, we have get first name, but no set first name in there. What do you think we would get if we truly did that? No getters, no setters at all. So this is not anything that reduces what you can do. First name is now completely hidden. Yeah? And this is kind of coding with intent as well. This is saying, hey, guess what? That really is private. But as I come in here, if I come in and leave these things like this, and then come back to my Java file for a moment, and I say person P equals new person, P dot set first name, Scott, P dot set last name, Davis. System out. Oh, goodness. How often do you type standing up in front of a room of your peers? It's tough. All right, so here we go. So now I have this person. In this Java code, can you tell that person was written in Groovy? Absolutely not. That's the point right there. That you can absolutely seamlessly mix and match these classes. I will come in here right now and I will groovic, person.groovy. I will javac, hello Java, and I will run hello Java. Oh no! All right, I guess Groovy's unusable. I'm sorry for wasting your time. I apologize about that. Yeah. Now, I'm obviously doing this from a command line to demonstrate. Normally, you would wrap this in an ant class. You would jar it and war it and ear it and deploy it and everything else. But what I wanted to show you in here that, oh, I've got an exception in thread main, Java lang no class, found error, Groovy, lang Groovy object. Remember that was that interface that we implemented in there? In order to Groovy enable any of your projects, you drop a single jar onto your class path, the Groovy jar. In order to hibernate enable your app, you drop the hibernate jar in your class path. Yeah? So this is not any different at all. So this will look ugly from the command line. I admit that right now. Oops. Java, class path, opt, Groovy. There's my Groovy jar right there. I will add the current path to there. So this looks much simpler when you're not doing it from the command line, when you're running it typically. But there we go. There's hello world. And there is the ugly print to string that we expect from Java, right? Yeah? So let's fix that briefly, and then I'll show you some other examples as we come in here. We know that all methods are public. Give me 1 second here. We know that all methods are public, so I can just write string to string like this. I could just do something like that as well. The last line of any Groovy method is an implicit return statement. So if you didn't like that, you could say return first name. You could also begin doing something like this, return last name. We have these string interpolations in there. You've seen that syntax before, haven't you? In ANT and JSPs, things like that. This is a valid string, but what it's doing is it's actually doing string interpolation. So I'll compile this and run it. Thank you for being patient. Yes. They are private. Yes, affirmative, yes, they are private. It's just fine, yeah. So actually, private and public and all these kinds of things are actually Java language features, not necessarily JVM features. And Groovy makes an outstanding unit testing tool because as the language designers, and it is a controversial language feature, I will grant it that. But as a unit tester, I love the fact that if I'm writing my unit tests in Groovy against my Java classes, I don't need to do reflection or anything like that in order to see those things. I can use Groovy and access those private variables directly. That's the thought behind allowing Groovy to see those private attributes, but it is a fairly controversial feature. Does that answer your question? Yeah? You don't have to like it. Yeah? But let's come in here and take a look here real quick. Let me compile this hello Java real quickly and run it out again. And there we get. Let me compile my Java code as well. No, let me compile my Groovy code as well. That's what I was missing. Right There we go. So let me recompile person.groovy. There we go. And I will run this once again. And there we get Scott Davis out of the bunch. Yes? Absolutely. We get complete bidirectional. And some of these more advanced examples I'm going to show you in just a moment here absolutely do that. You'll see in Groovy I'm using Java files. I'm using Java util array lists and things like that. So we get complete bidirectionality. To prove this, and again, remember earlier I said that Groovy is a perfect superset of Java. So let me do this. Let me actually copy hello Java.java to hello Groovy.groovy. Yeah? And the only thing I'm going to change in this is obviously I need to come in here and change the name of the class, right? But otherwise, this is my Java code unchanged. Groovy, hello Groovy, and it executes as expected. So this is a very, very important language feature. I'm not here teaching you, telling you to learn a new language. I have nothing but respect for Ruby. Ruby is a beautiful language, but Ruby is not Java. You know, if you like Hibernate, you're not going to use Hibernate in Ruby. You're going to use Active Record. If you like Java util array lists, you're not going to use them in JRuby. JRuby is about bringing Ruby developers to the Java platform. Groovy is about bringing those cool language features to the Java language, if you will. So that's how we're able to do these kinds of things. Yes? Absolutely. The question is, can I write a servlet in Groovy? Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, the talk that I'm doing at the end of the day today, Grails, is a web framework that is written in Groovy, but in fact, it is a Spring Hibernate application. So it is using Spring, it's using Hibernate, it's using JUnit, it's using Xerxes, it's using all of those Java classes, and it's just using Groovy as the glue language. I'll produce a WAR file and deploy to Tomcat. And there is zero danger in doing this. If I don't like writing Groovy classes, I can write Java classes. If I don't like writing GSPs, Groovy server pages, I can write JSPs, Java server pages, because it is Java at the end of the day. It is a standard WAR. It is Tomcat. It is everything. Excellent question. Well, how about IDE support? All the major IDEs support it. IntelliJ, Eclipse, NetBeans. For a long time, IntelliJ had probably the best support. IntelliJ, of course, is a commercial IDE. It's not free. One of the founders of G21, the Groovy company, was Alex Kochman, who was the former CEO of JetBrains, the makers of IntelliJ. I know that was a long route to get there, but IntelliJ has historically had the strongest support for Groovy and Grails. But Spring, who acquired Groovy and Grails right now, Spring Source has acquired them. They're a big Eclipse shop. They just released a Groovy plugin for Eclipse that's supposed to be very, very good. NetBeans has got very good Groovy and Grails support in it as well. It is Java at the end of the day, but what Groovy plugins bring you are code, syntax, highlighting, and debugging support, and some various things like that. Yeah? Please. Very good question. What version of JDK does it support? It supports JDK 1.5 and 1.6. Technically, you could probably get by with running it on JDK 1.4 as well, but slowly but surely 1.4 supports being deprecated. It's fully deprecated in Grails. Grails you must run on 1.5 and above. They are cross-compiling Groovy for the 1.4 JDK, but you'll be missing out on some of the cooler, more advanced features. But 1.5 and above, you're good. Absolutely. Yep. Yep. So what it would look like, and I don't have an ant example up here, but if you go in and look at how that's done, you literally have a Groovy C ant task that wraps your Java C ant task. So and there's Maven support for it as well. So however you do that, there's the Groovy C ant task, the meta compiler that would do these kinds of things. Let me show you a little more code examples here. These are all very good questions, by the way. So we've now seen array lists, yes, that allow us to do this kind of thing. Doesn't it drive you crazy that you can't instantiate a fully populated array list? You have to create an array list and then add elements. What are the constructor arguments for array list? Another array list. Well, if I had the list, why would I need a new list? How can I do it? No, that doesn't work for me. And iterating through list. Oh, you love for iterator I equals list.iterator. Iterator has next, right? And I know, you're saying, what about Java 5? Okay, that does significantly shorten this. But what if we were to do something like this? What if? Huh? All right. So, when it comes to creating a list, I will say, here are the languages that I know. I know Java, and I know Groovy, and I don't know why I'm all thumbs today. I apologize about that. JavaScript. We'll see that Langs is indeed a Java util array list. I'm now just running this inside of my text editor at this point, just hitting Apple R to run these kinds of things. We say that is a Java util array list. And so I could continue using those Java idioms, but if I just want to walk through each item in that list, why not just do that? Just walk through each item in that list and print it out. Each is technically a closure, and so this is a new language feature, but if we want to think about it as a very simple iterator, it makes it very nice. So if I turn around now and I say, here is my name, that's clearly a string, isn't it? I can do a name each, println it, and it will walk through each letter in that string and do it. This each iterator is very powerful. You'll see it show up over and over again. You can walk through each record in a result set. You can walk through each line in a file. You can walk through each, these kinds of things. So again, just wanted to show you that, yes, we have Java util array lists, and this is perfectly valid. You could declare your list in Java syntax and then simply iterate it over it in Groovy. But this is an array list. It's not a Groovy array list. It is a Java util array list. Yeah? And so these examples over and over and over again, we'll see hash maps in here. We do map put and manage these kinds of things. Whereas in Groovy, the syntax I use to define a hash map is simple name, value, name, value, name, value. So once again, I can come in and define a map. Here we go. I'm the dad. Here's the mom. Here's my kid, Chris. Yes? And so I can walk through here, family.each, and print them out. Yeah? One of the things I can do is I can define named values on that. And so rather than printing out it, yeah, I could print out the key, or I could print out the value, or doing the string interpolation that I was doing before, I could say value is the key. Ask me again. No, it'll do just your hash map syntax idiomatically works the same way. So the last one in would override those kinds of things. But what's really interesting about that was a very good question, by the way. What's really interesting about this, let me comment that out for a moment, is outside of a loop, if I were to just do something like this, family.dad, I'm getting the dad out. Or family.mom and getting the mom out. Now, everything that you normally do in Java is still 100% supported. Yeah, so that is perfectly valid as well. What did I do? Oh, get, not put. There we go. We already have a mom. We don't need to. That's fine. Okay. Yeah. So having this Java syntax right there is perfectly valid. And again, in the spirit of the amazing Groovy weight loss plan, I could do system.out.println and surround these things in parentheses. And you begin seeing that that's perfectly valid syntax. But why on earth would I type out all of that when I could do something like this and get exactly the equivalent? So much so that I can also come in. I not only have a son, Christopher, I have a daughter, Elizabeth. We call her Libby for short. If I come in and take a look at this now, not only have I printed out the family members, I have added Libby to the family as well. So we have this very natural ease of use syntax to manage this kind of stuff. Does that make sense? Here's where the amazing weight loss plan comes in. What is this monstrosity trying to accomplish? The simplest possible thing you might want to do in Java. Open up a text file, walk through it line by line, and print out the results. I did not pad this. This is idiomatic Java right here. This is what we're trying to do. And doesn't this read like Shakespearean prose? While line equals buffered reader, read line doesn't equal null. That's self-obfuscating code right there, isn't it? Yeah? I mean, I would explain to someone, no, what I want to do is walk through each line of this file and print it out. I wouldn't say I want to do a try, catch with a finally block that has a try catch in the middle of the finally block, right? I mean, there's really only about 2 or 3 lines that interest me, and the rest of this is ceremony. This is the Groovy equivalent. We're going to walk through a file. How are we going to walk through each line of that file and print out the results? Yes? What would you expect to happen? This is a very good question. Let me do, I'm sorry, I was trying to talk and type the same thing. Let me do one thing. I'm going to answer that by demonstrating it, okay? So I will come in here real quickly. Here we go. These are the languages that I know. I am now in langs.txt. And if I come in and do a file test.groovy. So your question was, what would you expect to happen if I tried to open a file that didn't exist? As a Java developer, what would you expect to happen? Absolutely. This is, let me try to force it. There we go. Now I'll get the file not found exception right there. Absolutely. And so even though I can use this simple syntax like right here, if I were deploying this into production, I would continue to wrap it in a try-catch and log the errors and all that. Here, let me make this ready for production right now. Try. Because I'm sure this is what we all do, right? Okay, so we're ready for production. Yeah? So yes, I would certainly do something more interesting than that. But yes, if we wanted to do that now here, and what I will actually do is this. I will, println, ouch, there we go. And so now we'll see that, ouch, I didn't find that file. But if I actually plug in a file that exists, langs, I get that stuff out. Yeah? Very good question. Very good question. So, XML. Here's where it gets interesting. Remember the triple quotes that I talked about earlier? Yes, this is a Java lang string, but what it allows me to do is have multiple lang strings in there. It would, if I had embedded attributes in here, I wouldn't have to escape out the embedded attributes. So this is a very simple way for me to get XML in. And then I can say new XML slurper. Oh, yes. The XML slurper. So, I will do some simple langs. Lang type equals static Java. Type equals dynamic Groovy. So if I were to print out the class type of that, we see that is truly a Java lang string right there. But what I can do is I can say, okay, def langs equals new XML slurper and parse out that XML. And now I can say langs.lang.each println it, and you can see I am navigating that. I'm not walking through each element of a string or each element of an attribute. I'm actually walking through the XML langs.lang.each and doing that. And if I wanted to get the type out of it, I could get the type out of it as well. I'm sorry? Yes, this is DOM manipulation. Yeah, so if you had gigabytes of XML, you probably wouldn't want to use that. But definitely megabytes, it's entirely possible. It just makes working with XML a breeze as well. Swing. Oh, swing breaks my heart. It's so hard to write in Java, right? Got a frame and a panel, and I had the panel to a frame and default size and all that. And by the time I get down there, I forgot what I was doing up here, right? Yeah. This is Swing Builder, where we start with a very natural frame, and inside of that frame I have a panel, and inside of that panel I have a label. These two are equivalent once again. So over and over again, what you see is we begin seeing that the Java equivalents are there, but Groovy is meant to dramatically simplify what we're trying to accomplish. Now, this is my last example. This will be a live example, so let's see if the internet gods are happy with me for a moment. Let me see if we can indeed come out to Twitter and do a search.twitter.com/search.atom and see how many of you have been twittering about GIDs. All right, so attended the Great Indian Developer Summit. Well, someone is speaking in a language I don't speak. But we begin seeing these kinds of things. This is obviously XML coming back out. And I'll make this a little bigger so you can see it. This is Atom. We'll see that we have a feed, and within each feed we have an entry, and within each entry we have a title, attended the Great Indian Developer Summit this week. Yeah? So if we come in here right now and grab this much, this is my big grand finale here. There is my address. We saw that that worked. Remember, we started with a feed, so if I come in here and say def feed equals new XML slurper dot parse that address, look what we're doing in one line. We are now reaching out over the web and pulling in this XML live on the fly. And if I come in here and do feed.entry.each println it.title right here, we should see that same XML feed. I'm stalling while it runs. That same XML feed, we call that the spinning beach ball of death on Apple. See, I did something. Yes, I'll kill that command. Let's try running this from here so I can talk at the same time. So Groovy, Twitter like this. We'll see in just a very few lines of code, holler when it works successfully, okay? There it is, right there. You know, we were able to, in a very few lines of code, reach out and get these kinds of things. And so I might decide that I want a quick separator in this here as well. I can turn around and say I want 25 dashes. Notice I'm doing string multiplication now. Take that string and multiply it 25 times. So I can come in here and run this once again and get some nice separators out of this. But in just 3 or 4 lines of code, imagine what that Java code would have looked like in the equivalent. It would have been a sea of tries and catches and buffered readers and input streams and all manner of other things like that. And so there's the output. If you presented that to someone, can you see the clarity of the code? Can you see what's going on in this? And yet, this is Java. If I compiled this, now I was just doing this as a script, but I could wrap it in a class, I could put it in a package, I could compile it and run it, and call this code from my existing Java code. You begin seeing the power of Groovy. Yeah? That I'm not asking any of you to change languages. I still consider myself a Java developer as well. But what I do is I use a slightly different dialect. I use Groovy, but I'm still using Java I/O files. I'm still using Java util array lists. I'm still using all of the classes that I would normally use. Now, which of these do you think works? Yeah? Which visual metaphor works? We have just 1 minute, but I can answer a couple of questions. Yes? So by debugging, you're beginning to get into IDE support, tool support, but you can throw debug flags everywhere that you want, and you might be stepping into some Groovy infrastructure code, which you would just step over to get to your code. But it is fundamentally bytecode at the end of the day. So that syntax is what you're buying in terms of clarity. It is equivalent Java code behind the scenes. Yes. Groovy is incorporated in. It can be used in JSF. It can be used in Seam. It could be used in any number of other frameworks. So I'm not leaving, but I think we're out of time. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. I really do appreciate it.